Assalamualaikum and a very good day to Madam Diana and my fellow friends. Our group will be presenting the topic Marginalist School. We are from group 24 and consist of 5 members. I would like to start this presentation with the introduction. The Marginalist School thrived at 1871 when Jevons and Menger released their famous publication on marginal utility theory. William Stanley Jevons, Carl Menger, Leon Walras, and Knut Wicksell developed the marginalist school of economic thinking in the 1870s. By the turn of the century, the marginalists had delved deeper into the process of rational decision making on both the demand and supply sides of the market. The marginalists maintained the most economic decisions were made on the margin. The term margin in economic refers to the next or additional units. The marginalists revolutionary work rapidly dominate supply and demand study, the theory of value and other areas connected to market actor decision making. Next is 5 major questions of the marginalist school, which are firstly the historical background of the marginalist school. Even a century after the start of the Industrial Revolution, serious economic and social problems remain unaddressed. This led to the poverty widespread, despite the fact that productivity was increasing. Next, the extremely uneven distribution of wealth and income created much dissatisfaction, even though the general standard of living was rising. Many people were negatively affected by business change, and individuals could no longer rely solely on their own initiative and ability to overcome circumstances that were pushed upon them. Also, farmers and farm laborers faced challenge and many were drawn to cities by the carrot of better possibilities and the club of rural poverty. Before effective workers' compensation laws were enacted, industrial accidents frequently caused substantial burden for workers and their families. Long hours of labor, hazardous and unhealthy working conditions, employer disproportionate economic power in bargaining with workers. The rise of monopolistic enterprise and insecurity in old age were just some of the issues that prompted people to look for solutions outside classical economic thinking. Besides that, the 19th century trend in Europe was the established three approaches to addressing serious social problems. Three approaches were to promote socialism, bolster trade unionism, or demand government action to improve living conditions by regulating the economy, eliminating abuse, and redistributing income. All three solutions were condemned by the marginalists. They thought with a seemingly Olympian impartiality, concluding that while classical economy value and distribution theories were incorrect, their policy view were correct. However, the marginalists defend market allocation and distribution, deplored government intervention, denounced socialism, and sought to encourage labor unionism as ineffectual or pernicious.
So for now, I will continue our presentation by explaining about major tenets of the marginalist school. First, focus on margin. The marginalist school is to focus its attention on the point of touch where decisions are made. In other words, on the margin. Secondly is a rational economic behavior. According to the marginalist school, people act rationally when balancing marginal benefit and marginal cost. Next is the pure competition emphasis. No single individual or company has enough cloth to sway market prices. Next major tenet of the marginalist school is emphasis on subjective utility. Demand is based on marginal utility, which is subjective psychological phenomenon according to the marginalist. Next is a measure of land rent. A measure of land rent is unearned revenue and unnecessary payment to assure land usage. Lastly is minimal government involvement. The marginalists continue the classical school defense of minimal government in the economy as the most desirable policy. Next, I will continue with how was the marginalist school valid, useful, or correct at this time. First, development of geometric diagrams and mathematical technique. The marginalist school development new and powerful tools of analysis, especially geometric diagrams and mathematical technique. Secondly, the importance of demand in determining prices. Demand conditions were accorded their due prominence as a driver of prices for both and commodities and sources of production. Next is the use of assumptions. The nation assumptions has gained a lot of traction. Okay, the next one is the method of partial equilibrium analysis. Investigators were able to examine complicated occurrences one step at a time. Lastly, emphasize on macroeconomic approach. Improve macroeconomic analysis, which may ignore numerous issues by looking at the economy as a whole.
Okay, now is whom did the marginalists benefits or seek to benefits? The marginalists aim to enhance humanity's interests by fostering a greater knowledge of how a market system allocates resources efficiently and promotes economic liberty. Second is maintaining status quo. The marginalists were successful in achieving this goal to a large extent. The marginalists countered Marxian's call for proletarian revolution by demonstrating that under competitive conditions, workers' remunerations would be equal to their contribution to the value of the output. However, individuals whose interests were solely in maintaining the status quo, that is, those who fought change, gain from marginalism, liberalism, economic or political conservatism. This type of theory benefit employers, even though most of them didn't understand it, by opposing union and attributing unemployment to unnecessary high pay, inflexible downtime, or vote. Landowners were also defended by marginalists from accusation based on Ricardian rent theory. This could be said to have benefited the wealthy who generally oppose government intervention that might redistribute income. Lastly, is which tenet of the marginalist school become lasting contribution. Several of the marginalist school ideas have since been challenged, and some have been rejected. The purported composition facially related with marginalist and neoclassical employment theory was cited by Keynes. If one firm were to cut, it could expand its market by selling more goods at lower price. The decline in purchasing power among its own employees would not affect it because they would normally buy only a negligible portion of its output. However, if all employees reduce their pay, their market might contract rather than expand. The Keynesian view that there are alternative means to reduction in nominal wage to achieve full employment. As new events occurred and new economic theories emerged, The marginalist idea that the best government is the one that interferes the least become outdated. The analysis of these thinkers originally was static, timeless, and unsubstantiated, with empirical evidence. There were few attempts at inductive verification of theory. In fact, hypotheses often were framed in ways that precluded testing. Business cycles were generally ignored in the firm conviction that supply created its own demand and therefore that full employment is the rule. So, the school failed to expand economic growth and its theory proved to be inadequate for slowly developing countries. These economists and their forerunners developed such lasting contribution as mathematical economic, the basic monopoly model, a theory of duopoly, the theory of diminishing marginal utility, the theory of rational consumer choice, the law of demand, the law of diminishing marginal return as it applies to manufacturing enterprises, the concept of turn to scale work leisure choice analysis, the marginal productivity theory of for returns, and so forth. In the past 2 decades, this choice theoretic approach introduced by the marginalists has experienced resurgence within economics.
Major figure of Marginalist school is William Stanley Jevons, Karl Menger, and Leon Walras. These three major figures was known as the Marginal Revolution. William Stanley Jevons was an economist and philosopher who foreshadowed several developments of 20th century. His father was Thomas Jevons and his mother is Mary Ann Roche. Before his major 1870 economic writings, William Stanley Jevons wrote his first important book entitled The Coal Question at 1865. This book is retrospectively essentially known for having pointed out the first base of what we call today rebound effect, known as well as the Jevons paradox. No one can deny the major contribution Jevons did by insisting on the energy efficiency paradoxical phenomenon. In 1882, with a number of unfinished books in process, Jevons drowned near Hastings while swimming when he was 46 years old. Karl Menger was widely known as the founder of the Austrian School of Economics. His father is Anton Menger and his mother is Caroline Gerzebeck. He an Austrian economist who wrote Principles of Economics in 1871 that was considered by many to be the founder of Austrian school. Menger explained in his book that the economic value of goods and services are subjective in nature, so what is valuable to you may not be valuable to your neighbor. The interesting about Karl Menger is he encouraged students to think independently through his work, and his aim was objectively knowledge, and he tried to treat all scientific problems without dogma. Leon Walras was a French mathematical economist and geologist. Her father was the French economist Auguste Walras. Separately but almost simultaneously, with William Stanley Jevons and Karl Menger, William Walras developed the idea of marginal utility and is thus considered one of the founders of the marginal revolution. But his biggest contribution was in what is now called general equilibrium theory.
The significance of its ideas. Usually, first, marginal utility, usually around how request depends on the global utility. The choice to buy a modern unit of a great benefit depends on the utility it gives, which is the concept of system start from the utility, not the generation tool. In other words, the shortage is the the thought that the global utility is wage of diminishing is troublesome to acknowledge and is it an adequate condition for instant consumer theory. Instead, the request for protection is the most perfect way to play down the utility of wage. So, with this, individuals choose whether or not to purchase an extra unit or of a grade or benefit based on the extra utility they will get from it. Okay, second, with the former start of marginalist school, which is marginalist school is microeconomic rather than macroeconomic. The approach of marginalist school is microeconomic rather than macroeconomic. That means is it does not deal with the aggregate economy, but instead deal with decision making of individual buyers, sellers, price of a single community of a single firm.
Next, duopoly will appear that the yield will be higher and the cost will be lower in duopoly than in restraining infrastructure. A Carnan balance gets to be more comparable to the competitive harmony, the more firms there are and the way better substitutes their items. Key arrangement to this duopoly issue is the same as the arrangement presently called Nash balance in the present-day amusement hypothesis. Then, the as is decided from the irrelevant utility. The top of diminishing negligible utility has to translate itself into a plummeting, slanting S-word. In this way, he recognized that the question twists as a inconsequential utility term. This was the pivotal moment when the cash-related reviewer proposed a theory of derived from a minor utility. Not only that, buyer overabundance is a relative utility. Relative utility is the zone under the demand or marginal utility turnover which the goods are transported. A measure of the welfare consequence of unmistakable cost concludes that one welfare is optimized when the cost is zero. A brief period is known as Marshall's, which is buyer wealth, follow a short time later. In addition, based on the above information, it is clear we can see that the ideas of marginalist school have many contributions from the point until presently, especially in the field of economics. As a conclusion, the marginalist school has a story. 1871, when Sir William and Sir Carl published their famous publications on marginal utility theory. The marginalist school is opposed to socialist ideology and government economic involvement. They emphasize the classical school's laissez-faire approach. In general, this school has laws, which is there are many of their views may still be found in modern textbook on economic principles and microeconomics. For the example is Theory of Monopoly and Duopoly by Sir Carnot, Theory of Value by Jevons. Beginning in 1890, a new era of purely economic thought, which is neoclassical economics, created a full and consistent new microeconomic theory. As a result, the marginalist period was merely a transitional period between the classical and neoclassical schools. That's all from our group. Thank you.